What up guys, Super Metal 993 here bringing you a kind of countdown, kind of get to know me kind of video you could say, where I'm just going to talk about 10 out of 10 albums that I consider perfect, flawless and all that jazz. I might do a part 2 video for this because as I was preparing for this video I was remembering, oh, that album. So there might be a follow-up video to this in the upcoming future. We'll just have to see what happens, but for now I've got 10 essential metal albums that you really need to check out in my opinion, and albums that I consider flawless. And I might as well just add, most people will have heard of these albums, but if you haven't, make sure you check them out because in my opinion they are fucking amazing. Now we're going to start off with some thrash that I've kind of brought up a little bit over the past year with the release of their latest album, but this album I haven't talked about properly on this channel, but let's get into it. But the first one is going to be Time Is Up by Havok. This is easily my favourite thrash album of all times. Now thrash, in my opinion, it's never been my favourite genre and it probably never will be, but there's still some good albums in there in my opinion and some classic albums. But there's a rare chance that an album for me will go, yeah, that is fucking amazing in the whole thrash world. Like, there's some ones that come close, like a 9 out of 10 maybe. But Havok, Time Is Up, easily takes a 10 out of 10 in my opinion. It highlights everything that I love about a bit of thrash metal. I like it to be aggressive. I like it to be emotion filled and right up in your grill, but it makes you want to headbang and you can sing along to it and know everything what's going on in their mindset, you know what I mean? Like, this album in my opinion is just quintessential as a guest when it comes to thrash. It highlights everything that I love about it, but the one thing that I do love is thrash that makes you want to headbang, and that's what it did back in the days when it first started coming about. It made you want to headbang, and it's done that for many years. But Havok, Time Is Up is easily one that I can stick on and put a smile on my face and make us headbang around my noon, and by the next day I'm needing a fucking neck brace. But I don't care, I'm still headbanging away to it because this is, in my opinion, the best thrash album. In my opinion personally, this is my own opinion, I know this is going to cause a bit of controversial opinions, but I think this is way better than anything Slayer, Megadeth, Metallica, or any of those legendary thrash bands, Creator, Exodus, all those bands. All of them have done really good albums, but nothing comes close to me like Time Is Up by Havok, because this is essential thrash if you ask me. And make sure you check out their new album, Conformicide, and check out my review and my top albums. Anyway, next up we're going to go to 2012 with one of my favourites from that year. I didn't do a top albums list, but this would have been really high on the list, and it's absolutely monolithic. That's the only way I can describe it. But I'm talking about Cattle Decapitation with Monolith of Inhumanity. Now this album, when I first heard it, it gave me goosebumps. It made us feel wow, like the experimentalness that Cattle Decapitation went through from the Harvest floor onto this is just blows the mind. And the Anthropocene Extinction is an absolute monolithic album as well, but this is where it all started for their newer style, you know what I mean, with more melodic passages, a little bit more of a progressive vibe in there, but it still contained that diabolical, intense, gut-wrenching, disturbing, like, craziness that Cattle Decapitation has been known for since the early days up until, well, the Anthropocene Extinction, and when a new album comes out it'll continue on from there. They've always had that wretchedness in them, but they're still adding something new that's making them stand out like a sore thumb compared to all the other death metal, death grind and grindcore and whatever genre you want to put these into. They make them stand out, and this album, in my opinion, is what makes them stand out, because there's obviously the diabolical tensity that the traditional Cattle Decapitation style songs do, but then you've got the songs like A Living Breathing Piece of Defecating Meat and Life Stalker, and Kingdom of Tyrants, which have this, like, epic, huge, and just crazy, like, epic, powerful moments that you just can't overthrow and just can't fathom yourself to just come to terms with what the fuck is going on every time you listen to it. And that's what I love about Cattle Decapitation's Monolith of Inhumanity. It is still one of my favourite albums, and every time I listen to it, I get goosebumps, and it just inspires us. It inspires me as a vocalist to become just something original like Travis Ryan is, if you know what I mean. But he's a big influence since I heard this album, and I absolutely love this album. So if you haven't heard it, I'll be very fucking disappointed in you. It's one of the best from 2012, and definitely one of the best albums in the past, let's say, in the past 8 years. So what can you do? But anyway, next up, we're going a bit more well-known territory with Amon Amarth, with, I believe it's one, yeah, with Oden on Our Side. Now, Amon Amarth were one of the first, in general, metal bands that I truly discovered and fell in love with. And it began back in the day with Twilight, the Thunder Gods, like hearing Guardians of Asgard. My buddies in Next Over, back in their early days, covering Twilight, the Thunder God, the title track. And then eventually getting the album and then hearing that album just made us go, I want more. And then you go into their back catalogue, because that was their latest album at the time, and I discovered With Oden on Our Side. And to me, like, I love Twilight the Thunder God, but when it comes to 10 out of 10 albums, this one takes the biscuit for me. This album, in my opinion, just holds much more power and a bit more majesticness and just triumph. It feels like a triumphant kind of album when you listen to it. It feels like a good time, headbangable kind of album. But in my opinion, what takes a biscuit and pushes this album to a 10 out of 10, besides the riffage, besides the tight musicianship and the atmospheres that are created on this album, in my opinion, the best thing is Johan Hegg's vocals. You just need to hear one song on this album to be just like, yeah, that's just it. And that is the song Under the Northern Star. One of their more sophomore songs. I believe it's their softest song. And that song just gives me goosebumps every fucking time I hear it. And it just makes me hair stand on end, makes us feel good. And that song alone would make it a 10 out of 10 album. But there's still some fantastic, heavy bitchin' tunes on here, like brute. Like, it feels like an absolute brute. I'm talking about Runes to a Memory. What's the song? With Oden on Our Side, the title track, Cry of the Blackbird. If you're a Amon Amarth fan and you haven't heard Cry of the Blackbird, just fuck off. And Under a Northern Star, just hear this album and you'll know exactly what I mean. I can listen to this and just feel so empowered just listening to it. It's amazing. In my opinion, it's the best thing Amon Amarth has ever done so far. Now, in Super Metal Recommend, I might as well just add, now that is definitely worthy of a 10 out of 10. Now, this album is one of the, in my opinion, criminally underrated deathcore bands in existence, or could be in existence, you could say. But I talked about them in Super Metal Recommendations, where I talked about Insurrection, and I'm going to be talking about, in my opinion, their best album, and one of the best deathcore albums ever to exist. I talked about Molotov Solution with The Harbinger. This album was one of the first deathcore songs I discovered was, I think it was Enslaved, off this album, and it was due to a guitar cover, or actually a guitar showcase of like an Ibanez 8-string, like the first 8-string that they'd done. And when I first discovered that song, that guitar getting showcased, one of the songs that was played was Enslaved. And from there on in, I decided to check out one of the songs that was definitely going around the Northeast scene at the time, was Corpus Imperium. And then it led on to the title track Harbinger being played live. And then after that, decided to pick up the album, and from there on in, it has become one of the most quintessential deathcore albums that I would say is an essential to anyone who either wants to get into deathcore or knows the definition of deathcore. This is definitely one of them. This is full of the most powerful and most devastating, eviscerating deathcore songs ever written. I mean, Warlords, as I said, Corpus Imperium, the Harbinger and Enslaved, Awakening, Atra Inritus, don't know how to pronounce it, but the fourth track, but, and Only the Dead. Every song on this album riffs so hard. If you have listened to Fit for an Autopsy, for example, and you want something along that lines, then you need to hear this, because this, in my opinion, is fucking as insanely brutal as the likes of The Process of Human Extermination or Hellbound, for example. But this deathcore album is easily one of the top 3 albums that you need to hear, and it's definitely worthy of a 10 out of 10 because it has so much impactfulness and emotion, and the lyrics. Nick Arthur, I think his name is. I don't think I can find it. It's in the lyric book somewhere, but I'm sure it's Nick Arthur. He is a lyrical fucking genius on this album. Just hear the song Enslaved. I think it's Enslaved. Well, lyrically on Insurrection in general, but this album is where it's at when it comes to riffs in deathcore. Just insanely fucking good. But yeah, make sure you check that one out. Fucking move that. Anyway, next up we're going to go into some blackened death metal in the form of Behemoth. And Behemoth were one of the kind of early black metal, death metal kind of bands. Like, I'm broadening both sides there. And from the first song I heard, which I believe was Of Fire and the Void, and Evangelion was my favourite album for a long time, until I discovered this album, and I was just like, they used to be more insane than Evangelion, and I was just like floored by it. I'm talking about Demigod by Behemoth. Now, if you're not familiar, there's the proper cover. Demigod by Behemoth is as insane as Behemoth got in their discography. Like, the Apostasy was pretty epic, and Evangelion was just everything that was leading up to. But where it comes to all-out brutality and just obliteration of everything in front of you, and you want to listen to something that any Behemoth fan will literally go, that is easily their most devastating album, they will tell you Demigod. Because Demigod, if you just need to hear the song, what's the song? Slave Shall Serve. When that kicks in, I literally feel like I'm getting ripped apart and pounded into the ground. Because that is, in my opinion, during that era of the Apostasy, Demigods, Evangelion, and the red one, which I can't remember the name of it, it escapes me. That's what was, I believe, their goal, is to bring the darkness, the blackness, but still eviscerate you with the death metalness. Like, bringing the darkness from the black metal sound, and then bringing the intensity when it came to the death metal side of things. And Demigod just highlights all that and puts it all into one. I mean, just hear the song Demigod as well. Demigod is an absolute essential black and death metal album, and definitely worthy of a 10 out of 10. I just wish this was the album that I discovered first off, and I just wish it was that, because I would have literally been just blown away. If I'd heard, what was the song I said? Slave Shall Serve, I would have just been like, no, I'm not getting into metal because this is too fucking scary. But it's a scary album to listen to, and if you've watched them live, like their live footage, they're just absolutely amazing, and I need to see them live, and this album is definitely proof of that. So definitely a 10 out of 10 album for me. Now this one, I kind of get the sense that everyone kind of either loves or hate this band personally, but in my opinion, I fucking love them. They've done some great albums over the years, and this one is definitely my favourite and definitely worthy of a 10 out of 10. I'm talking about Lamb of God with Ashes of the Wake. Now, Ashes of the Wake, when I first heard it, all back in the early days when I was discovering music in general at the time, the first song I heard was obviously Laid to Rest, and me old van back in the day, which I've changed my name a few times, but they wanted to cover Laid to Rest, and I was quite skeptical about it at first, and we didn't end up actually covering it, but it introduced me to Lamb of God, and I just fell in love with that song, had it on repeat quite a bit, and then I discovered, obviously, Redneck and stuff like that. But over the years, I've listened to Lamb of God. Every time someone asks me what's the best Lamb of God album, I always say their best album is probably Sacrament, because all in all, it's fantastic. But when it comes to all our favourites, and my one that I would consider a 10 out of 10, it goes to Ashes to the Wake, because this album has inspired me so much as a vocalist, because the vocal range from Randy is powerful, emotion filled, and you can understand anything that he's fucking saying. But not only that, it contains my favourite Lamb of God song. And this is kind of like an odd choice. I put this on my Instagram story not too long ago. And my favourite Lamb of God song has to be the 4th track, The Faded Line. I love the grooves. I love the drumming. I love everything about the riffs, the drums, the vocals. Everything about it just comes in at one. And then I listened to this album not too long ago. And I thought, why the fuck have I not considered that for 10 out of 10 albums? Because it is a 10 out of 10 fucking album. Every song on this, from front to back, is absolutely amazing. Grooving, catchy, just simple when it needs to be. But still, you listen to it, and a lot of the passages are actually pretty fucking technical. And Chris Adler's drumming, he is one of the tightest drummers. I don't care what anyone says. He is airtight, and he knows how to fill in blanks, and this album is a prime example of what I'm on about. And Randy's vocals, everything about it, this album is just fucking amazing to me. And I have to say though, me auntie, she's in stuff like Alter Bridge, Nickelback, Blackstone Cherry, Five Finger Death Punch. She likes a bit of that kind of metal. I showed her these, and I was quite surprised. She actually really loves them now, and I'm like, well, whoa, these are a completely different kettle of fish to what you're used to, but she absolutely loves them, and I absolutely love this album, and this is mine and hers favourite album, and this, to me, is just quintessential album to listen to. If you want something to get into the more extreme sides of metal, and you're only used to listening to, like, likes of Five Finger Death Punch and stuff, I'd say this is a great platform to build from, in my opinion. That's what I think, anyway. Loads of people may disagree, but I don't, so Lamb of God, Ashes of the Wake, check out the song, Hourglass, The Faded Line, the Blood of the Scribe, just amazing, amazing stuff. Now we're going into a bit of unknown territory with Trigger the Bloodshed with Degenerate. Now this is another album I believe came out in 2012, I could be wrong on that, but this album, like Trigger the Bloodshed, were one of the first death metal bands that I saw live. I saw them with Annotations and AUTOPSY, which we'll be talking about in a bit, spoiler alert, Wyattxhim and me cousin's band back in the day. And back then, I wasn't really aware of what was going on when it came to like genres and stuff. I just knew I liked Trigger the Bloodshed, Wyattxhim, and Annotations and AUTOPSY. And I ended up buying The Great Depression, and I absolutely loved that album. But one thing that makes this one, the album that followed in 2012, because I saw them back in 2009, but when this came out, I fell in love with it. I think this is one of the most criminally underrated death metal albums, because this, in my opinion, has a bit of a more modern kind of vibe. It doesn't really have a bit of an old school vibe. It's definitely the more modern style of death metal side of things, and it has a lot of technical roots in there, but it's fast, it's intense, it's powerful, gut-wrenching, and just all-out sheer assault, if you ask me. Like, that cover, in my opinion, just explains what it is coming at you. It's a tank, and it's not going to travel at 2 miles an hour. It's going to travel at fucking 200 miles an hour right in your fucking face and pound you into the fucking ground. And my god, that's what this album does. It pounds you right in the face. The song, The Soulful Dead, is easily one of my favourite death metal songs of all times. I used to practice my vocals to it back in the day, and I probably should get back into it because it did have a lot of me vocals, but I'm going to gloss over that. But from front to back, this album just eviscerates and pounds you into the fucking ground, and it's definitely one of the death metal essentials, in my opinion. And if you haven't heard this album, you need to, and I just hope I know they did a Kingdom Come EP not too long after this album. I think it was like a year or two after. But I want them to come back so much and just bring something like this, because this is as diabolical and intense as it gets. It's just gut-wrenching. I absolutely love it. I'd say if you're a fan of like modern technical kind of death metal, you'd find something to like about Trigger the Bloodshed. Definitely check that album out, because in my opinion it's amazing and definitely criminally underrated. Got me coffee, happy about that. Anyway, next up we're going a bit more sophomore. Let's go a bit more sophomore into an album that I've talked about or mentioned a few times, but never actually properly talked about, in all honesty, and that is Agalloch, the Mantle. Now, obviously, atmospheric black metal is my third favourite genre, probably second, maybe. I haven't tossed between it, but just behind death metal in general. And atmospheric black metal, I've discovered a number of bands over the years, and a number of albums have obviously come close to that 10 out of 10 spot. There's obviously the likes of Woden Throne Losses, which is my favourite album in the genre. But Loss and, what's it called, Curse, come to mind for this video. Druk's Autumn Aurora, that's a great album. But then I just remembered, I was like, that album I haven't talked about. And this album I discovered back when I first discovered Countblagorath, and he did a recommendation video, and this was the first album he talked about, and I was like, okay, I have to check that out. And since then, this has turned into one of my favourite albums of all time. You just need to hear the In the Shadow of Our Pale Communion, I think it's called. I'm going to pull the booklet out, actually, but while I'm still talking, but like, yeah, In the Shadow of Our Pale Communion. If you haven't heard that song, you just need to. It is filled with so much beauty, so much majesticness. It's literally like magic listening to it. It's so beautiful, so serenading, and just picturesque. The picturesque moment is a fine thing to come across in atmospheric black metal, if you ask me. Because an album for atmospheric black metal to become picturesque, you need to submerge yourself and just submit to the album and just listen to it, and you'll know exactly when that mood just clicks for you, when you can feel yourself in the album itself. And this album definitely covers that spectrum of things. I haven't listened to the remastered, but this album, the original version, I've had quite a few years now, and I will never part ways with this, because this is definitely one of my favourite albums of all times. It's beautiful, majestic. It's not even got any nastiness to it. Like, even the atmospheric, like the black metal-y kind of parts that come across, they don't really like rip your face off or make you grit your teeth. It just fills it with atmosphere, and that's what you need with a good atmospheric black metal album. And this is definitely one of the best, if not the best. I can't toss it up between Loss and this. It keeps on chopping and changing depending if I've listened to Loss too much, I'll go back to the Mantle, and Mantle becomes my favourite, and then when I listen to the Mantle, I'll go back to Loss, and Loss becomes my favourite. That's literally how it is, and this is one of the greatest albums of all time. If you want something that's just beautiful, then this is easily the 10 out of 10 album for you. Next up, one of my favourite death metal bands of all time, and definitely something that I've talked about recently in my top album video. I'm talking about Ritual by the Black Dahlia Murder. Now, the Black Dahlia Murder have obviously been a band that has been with me since the beginning, and I'll talk about the beginning days in another video. But when it came to this video, I wanted to put the Black Dahlia Murder album on because they have made some great albums. Nocturnal was going to be in here, but every time I think of the Black Dahlia Murder, I think of Moonlight Equilibrium. On Sterling Seas of Salted Blood, Carbonized in Cruciform, what's the other song? A Shrine of Madness. I think of all those songs, and then coincidentally, it's on Ritual. And Ritual is definitely my favourite because it already highlights what I loved about the Black Dahlia Murder. The melodic riffage that kind of feels like really fast metalcore riffage. But then, on top of that, the fast drumming always being tight, because Shannon Lucas is an absolute fucking monster drummer, and easily one of my favourite death metal drummers of all time. And honestly, when it came to the Black Dahlia Murder's discography, I thought their best lineup, the best musicianship, and what pushed more strings for me on an album was this one, because they added a bit more to the album with means of like orchestral kind of parts in there, just to give it that bit more atmosphere and silhouettingness and serenading kind of vibes in there. But then the blast beats come in, the melodic riffs that just put in mind, as I said, of fast metalcore riffs. And then Trevor Strnad's vocals are piercing. I think they're definitely the most piercing they've ever sounded, but not the most aggressive, I'd say. But I don't care about that, because all the elements add up to this album being one of my favourites. I am thinking I might as well add of getting, if this will fucking focus, there we go, I'm getting this figure tattooed on us sometime, because this album, in my opinion, is just so goddamn fucking good. I absolutely love this song, and every time I listen to it, I just fell in love with it. I might as well just quickly add, a couple of years ago, when I was in one of my old houses, I was just chilling in my room listening to this album. My younger brother was passed out in his room after being on a drunk night out, and my younger brother, and then my older brother came in the room and started talking about Black Dahlia murder and the fact that when we saw them and stuff, and then he said, "Oh, come here," and he got me iPhone, and I was like, "Oh no, the CD," and I was like, "What are you doing?" He was like, "Watch this," and he went in my brother's room. My brother had speakers in his room, and he put the disc in, turned on full volume, and put, I believe it was A Shrine of Madness, or it may have been on Sterling Seas of Salted Blood, I can't remember, but it had the soft intro, and not a buzz, and then me and my brother shut the door, and it was on full belt, and then it kicked in. My brother leapt out of his bed and fell over. Oh my god, I was pissing myself laughing. Just a little fun story about this album. But honestly, check out the Black Dahlia Murders Ritual. It is, in my opinion, their best album to date. Like, Nightbringers was so close. So fucking close. Anyway, next up, we've got two more left. And this one I only recently added because I just remembered, forgot about that one. And we're going to be talking about one of the kings of riffs. Just sheer riffs and heaviness. I'm talking about Gojira with, From Mars to Sirius. I always get it mixed up with one of my favourite tracks, but anyway. From Mars to Sirius. My first introduction to Gojira, and Gojira have grown to become one of the biggest names in progressive metal and even metal in general. They are iconic as they get, with simple, catchy riffs that are still very progressive, very melodic. But then the drums being really technical as hell, and then the vocals not only being sheer power and sheer emotion filled, not only that, but they're not singing about killing anyone, like slaughtering, pulling out their guts, ripping their entrails out and stuff like that. No, they're singing about other things that I believe it's like the environmental sort of stuff and Earth in general. And this album, in my opinion, when it comes to their discography, Letter von Sauvage number 2, and probably The Way of All Flesh, probably number 3. But From Mars to Sirius is where it's at, in my opinion, with the riffage. You just need to hear one song to know what the fuck I'm talking about, and that is the song In the Wilderness. In the Wilderness is pounding riffs, the headbang, and just bring the absolute heaviness, and just, I absolutely love it. And the vocals take on a bit more of a guttural sort of approach and just feel like diabolical and powerful. But then you've also got the song Ocean Planet, which is an excellent fucking song. Backbone, that's obviously a well-known fucking song. Flying Wheels, From Mars to Sirius. From Mars, the first part is quite different compared to Sirius, but you have to listen to both of them to know what I mean. You just need to hear this album all the way through, because in my opinion, not many people talk, in my opinion, about From Mars to Sirius enough, because this album, when I first heard it back in the day, I fell in love with how heavy it was, and you will fall in love with Gojira. Like, in my opinion, they're kind of like a more modern version of Lamb of God, in my opinion. Like, that kind of vibes going on. Like, their fan base has kind of moved on to Gojira and love Gojira, you know what I mean? That's the kind of vibes I get. I could be wrong on that sense, and go on, shoot me if you want, and unsubscribe, but this album is where it's at when it comes to Gojira, if you ask me. Just check it out. It's criminally underrated, untalked about, so you need to fucking hear it, because it's definitely worthy of a 10 out of 10. Now, as I said before, we're going to get to this album eventually, because this album, in my opinion, from when it came out in 2010, it was one of the first death metal albums that I fell in love with. Like, I fell in love with the likes of Evisceration, played by Cannibal Corpse, around this time. I believe I fell in love with Nocturnal by the Black Dahlia Murder around this time as well. I fell in love around that time with that album. And this was always there in the background as being one of my favourites, if not me favourite death metal album at any given time. And this one, in my opinion, just takes a biscuit, and it's easily a 10 out of 10. It's not better than any of these other ones. All these share their own rightful place in the 10 out of 10 Hall of Fame of Super Metal 1993, whatever the fuck you want to determine it by. But this one, for me, is absolutely amazing. It's a little bit beat up, but I still love this album. Annotations of an Autopsy with album, well, obviously, 2, The Reign of Darkness. This album means a lot to me. If it wasn't for this album, I wouldn't be into death metal as much as I am. Because this is fast, it's brutal, it's heavy, it's a completely different kettle of fish. It's like one of those albums where a band decides to change their style completely. Like, back in the days, like, excuse me, before the Throne of Infection, and I believe it's Welcome to Sludge City EP? Yeah. They were more of a brutal, deathcore, slammy kind of band, but then decided to change up their sound completely and go for just some straight up kind of technical death metal, you could say. I could be wrong, like, when I say that, but it's really technical, fast and obliterating, if you ask me. And then they decided to go on and go under a different style of kind of like beatdowny deathcore kind of stuff, which is a bit of a different change, if you ask me. But this one is where it's at when it comes to death metal. I put this up there as one of the best death metal albums. And I know there's albums with better production, but the character what this album has and what it did for me just makes it a 10 out of 10 album for me. I absolutely adore it. There's so many good songs. In Snake's Eye Bathe, Born Dead, Emptiness, check out Bone Crown featuring Eric Rutan, who done, he's also, Eric Rutan is obviously from Hate Eternal, and has obviously mixed and recorded every Cannibal Corpse album for the past, God knows how long. But anyway, Emptiness, Impale the Sun, Cryogenica, what a song, Into the Black Slumber, and wow, I just wish these guys were still playing this style. And there's loads of people who agree with me and feel that way, but bands change, what can I say? This was definitely a golden album when it first came out, and it's definitely influenced me when it comes to death metal and mirrors the metalhead and death metal fan that I am today, and I owe it a lot, and for that reason it is a 10 out of 10. I absolutely love this album, and I would never part ways with it and consider it any less than a 10 out of 10. So yeah, that is 10 out of 10 albums for you. I hope you've enjoyed this. As I said before, I may very well do a follow-up video, because there is a couple of albums that I'm still thinking of. Like, during this video I thought, ooh, that one could work, ooh, that one could work. You know, so that's coming up, but that'll come in the upcoming future, because I've got a couple of videos along this sort of line, like where you get to know me a little bit more, where I want to talk about old but gold albums. That's just my opinion. So pre-2005, because 2005 was when I actually started to just listen to metal properly. So anything before then, I will be talking about old but gold for me. There's also 20 albums I got as into death metal. I've kind of covered a lot of them here, but that's just a debate at the moment. Maybe some black metal, because black metal was a later genre for me, so I would like to talk about that. But we'll see what happens in the upcoming future. But obviously, updates and purchases and all that's going to still come. Don't worry about that. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed this video and discovered some new bands, because that's obviously the goal. But yeah, I'll see you until the next video. And remember, stay metal, and I'll see you later.